Welcome to Climate Change, the Smoking Gun. My name is Professor Rob Fleming, and you're in the course Principles and Methodologies for Sustainable Design. Last week we looked at the start of the green design movement and asked the question, is it enough? This week we're going to take a look at climate change and the relationship between human behaviors and trying to solve widespread problems that humanity needs to address. So let's go ahead and get started, shall we? We'll begin by asking the question, what's a metaphor anyway? Do you believe that smoking cigarettes can cause cancer? In the US in the 1950s and 60s, smoking was quite common. Most people smoked a pack a day or more. Smoking was considered to be sexy. Cowboys smoked. It was rugged. It was masculine. It was the thing to do. Doctors smoked cigarettes. It was part of being healthy. Even Santa Claus smoked. It was so common and so normal and so ordinary in our culture. But over time, people began to notice that there was all kinds of different chemicals and toxins inside cigarettes. And they also began to notice that deaths were occurring at a very frequent rate, making people wonder, I wonder if the ingredients in the cigarettes were making people sick. And over time, slowly, those kinds of intuitions became more known scientifically. And eventually, larger society decided that we had to put a stop to smoking as a general health risk to human society. And so you'll see advertising, all kinds of peer pressure used to help people to shift their values and their beliefs and ultimately their behaviors away from smoking cigarettes. And so, for example, you'll see things like this, like the Great American Smokeout Day. So every year, everybody would agree to not smoke on a certain day. And this was a way to change human behavior and start to think that maybe there's a way to solve this widespread problem. Eventually, those who were responsible for the chemicals in the cigarettes that were making people sick were held accountable. And so this is a picture of U.S. congressmen claiming and swearing that nicotine is not addictive, even though later we know that they all came forward and admitted that it was. So we know that these problems can be solved, but it takes a great sense of urgency and a great sense of will to find widespread solutions to widespread problems. Eventually the government does intercede and does all kinds of things like raising taxes or putting warnings on labels to try to get people to slow the rate of smoking. And eventually in the US you see that it did indeed work. And if you look from 1950 here in the diagram to the decline to 1990, you'll see that there was a great decline in smoking. So this is really a story and a parable about how other kinds of widespread problems or opportunities can be dealt with relatively quickly. So I ask you, do you believe in global warming? And I hate to say it, but the word belief is really not the right word to use here, but we see it asked this way quite often, which is part of the problem. So if we begin to look at the long history of humans, in this chart, if you look back, humans have been on the planet for roughly 100,000 years back here, and the weather has been relatively predictable with interglacials here and ice ages here, and you see that impacts human behavior on many levels. But more recently, over the last 10 to 12,000 years, we see this amazing period of favorable climate that has helped humanity to propel itself to the top of the food chain. We call that the Holocene. And here we see the emergence of the great civilizations. And we covered a lot of this in week 1, so I'm going to continue to move forward and look at this very briefly. If we zoom in to that same oval, we'll see that, for example, here we've got the last 12,000 years, and I put an exaggerated orange line on the right there. You can see it go up. The temperature is probably not going to do that, although the risk that we're facing right now is to reach a level of climate or level of temperature in the atmosphere that we have never seen in humanity's history. So part of us would like to say, I'd like to try to deal with that. I'd like to try to address that. I think that rather than finding out how we can adapt to such a climatic shift, I'd rather try to change the forces now to try to begin to reverse that rise in temperature. And that's really partly what sustainable design is about. And so one of the things that we know, and it's funny, there's so much misinformation right now, so much confusion about climate change in this country. There are some facts out there that we know for sure. For example, we know that the amount of carbon in the atmosphere is at a staggering level compared to almost any time that it's been in the past, and certainly any time in which humanity has been on the planet. And so we begin to wonder, what can that carbon begin to do to the environment? Could it be launching us into a brand new environmental climatic period called the Anthropocene, which is the first climatic period created by human beings? And so our global temperatures right now are the highest we've seen in 4,000 years. And we have lots of ice cores and samples to prove that, which is great. So I wonder if that's the truth, though. I think some people look at that information and they say, that seems suspicious to me. But we know over and over again, we hear that 97 out of 100 climate experts think that humans are causing global warming. That's pretty remarkable. I'd like to tell you that there was a point when 97% of scientists were sure that smoking and cancer were linked. And yet, somehow, there was always this 3% of scientists who were willing to say, oh no, it's inconclusive, we don't know for sure, let's not take any action until we know for sure. And this is the great problem with when we face these large climatic or environmental problems is it safe to respond at a high level? And we don't want to, and we begin to wonder whether it's the right thing to do. It's very confusing, and you can tell by my words right there how confusing it can be. So let's go ahead and move on. So the problem is there's a fine line between climate skepticism, which is a healthy questioning of the facts, and climate denial. The more that we go against the facts, the more that we argue against them, the more we delay action towards a possible solution to this major problem. Now we're going to confine this course ultimately to sustainable design and the impacts of the built environment. We can't solve all of the climate problems in the things that we do. And I know that all of you have seen these statistics over and over again, and really I find them actually quite boring. But since I've been doing sustainability for 18 years, and since I'm still waiting for so many architects and designers to begin to take on this challenge, I find the need to continue to show these statistics, hoping that people will begin to make the correlation between the way that we design and build and habitate and demolish our buildings is really one of the primary generators of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And we see that a lot of the energy use, 72% of the electricity consumption is used just for making buildings warm, cool, and providing lighting. So we have a big role to play here in how we're going to counteract the directions that the climate's heading right now and move maybe to a different direction. But in order to do that, we're going to need a framework. We're going to need some frame of reference, a lens, a roadmap, an ethic, a paradigm shift perhaps, maybe even a new worldview, which I believe we're moving into. But ultimately, we need to move forward. We can't rely on the excuse, well, I don't know what sustainability means, so I'm not going to take any action. That's just, in my view, unacceptable. And this course is going to give that answer and make it quite clear what sustainability is and what designers can do. So this is the end of our short video here on climate change, the smoking gun. If you're a grazer, please continue on the Vimeo site and watch the next lecture. If you're a student or scholar, return back to the course sites page and begin to take the quizzes and do any readings that you might see there. Thank you. And next week we're going to take a look at the triple bottom line, a well-organized framework for sustainability.